They called us the perfect family, the Morgans, with our wide smiles, elegant dinners, and yearly vacations that painted a flawless picture on social media. But behind closed doors, we were splinters glued together by secrets and silence. And I didn't realize how deep the rot went until it was too late. Growing up, I adored my cousin Lily like a sister. We shared clothes, dreams, late-night talks, and I trusted her more than anyone, even more than my own brother, Daniel, who had slowly distanced himself from me. After our mother died, our father remarried within a year, bringing in Vanessa, a woman who smiled too sweetly and watched me too closely. On my 25th birthday, I found an old box in the attic, one that belonged to my mother. Inside were letters she wrote but never sent, filled with heartbreak and suspicions. She believed my father was cheating, not just with anyone but with her own sister, Lily's mother, my aunt. At first, I thought it was just her pain talking, grief twisting memories, but something didn't sit right, so I started digging quietly, going through old receipts, journals, family photos, noticing things I had never paid attention to. How Lily's mom always seemed to be around, how Dad avoided eye contact when her name came up, and how Lily herself would shut down when I asked about our family. The truth came crashing down one evening when I confronted my father, and he didn't deny it. He simply said, "You weren't supposed to find out." He admitted to the affair, admitted that my mother had found out just before her accident, and the worst part, he wasn't even sure if Daniel and I had the same mother. My hands trembled for days, but the betrayal didn't end there. When I went to Lily, shaking and broken, hoping for comfort, she stared at me in silence, then said she already knew. Not only did she know, she had helped her mother hide the letters after my mother died, helped bury the truth because it was better that way. I felt something snap inside me that day. I moved out of the house, cut ties with everyone, but that wasn't enough. I needed them to feel what I felt. The disorientation, the rage, the heartbreak, so I began my quiet revenge, not with violence or confrontation but with truth. I leaked the story to the press anonymously, exposing my father's affair, the company funds he funneled into a secret property under Lily's name, the illegitimate business deals he signed with my uncle's help. The media swarmed, investors pulled out, my father was forced to step down, and Lily's scholarship fund, built on stolen money, was frozen pending investigation. The house that once held laughter, now echoed with whispers and shame. But revenge is a double-edged blade, and when Daniel came to me, eyes red, voice shaking, and said, "You destroyed them all. But you destroyed me too," I realized I had lost the only sibling who truly loved me, and I didn't even know if we were truly siblings at all. Now I sit in silence most nights, staring at the box of letters that started it all, wondering if the truth was worth it. If exposing the lies really healed anything, because I still feel empty, I still cry, and I still miss the family I thought I had, even though it never really existed. But one thing I know for sure, I will never again trust a smile without looking behind it, and I will never again silence my instincts for the sake of peace, because sometimes peace is just the cover we use to bury the war within. Months passed, the headlines faded, but the scars remained, and I found myself in a small coastal town far from the chaos, renting a tiny apartment where no one knew my name. I told myself I came here to heal, to breathe, but deep down I was hiding from the shame, the loneliness, and the question that haunted me most: who am I if everything I believed about myself was a lie? One rainy afternoon, while sorting through the last of my mother's things, I found a locket hidden in the lining of an old purse. Inside was a tiny photo, my mother holding a baby, not me, not Daniel, but a child I didn't recognize. On the back, in faint ink, was written, "For Emily, the one I couldn't keep." My breath caught, and suddenly the silence around me grew heavy. I had never heard of an Emily. No one in the family had ever mentioned her. I called Daniel, hesitant but desperate, and to my surprise he answered, his voice cold but curious. And when I told him what I found, there was silence. Then he whispered, "I think it's time you meet someone." He sent me an address just outside the city, a quiet home nestled in the hills, and when I arrived, a woman opened the door, older than me by maybe 10 years, with eyes that looked just like mine. She smiled hesitantly and said, "You must be my sister." Emily had been adopted, hidden away before our mother ever met my father, born from a relationship our grandparents disapproved of, and erased from the family history like a stain on a white sheet. My mother had tried to reconnect with her but never got the chance, and Emily too had grown up with questions, with holes in her heart that no one could explain. We sat for hours, exchanging stories, laughter, even tears, and for the first time in years I felt something like warmth, something like belonging. I had lost so much, but in that moment I realized I hadn't lost everything. But just as I began to rebuild, the past came knocking again. I received a letter, unsigned, but I recognized the handwriting instantly. It was from Lily. She begged for a meeting, just one, said she had something to confess, something that would change everything I thought I knew. I almost didn't go, but curiosity is a cruel master, so I met her at an abandoned pier, the place we used to visit as kids. She looked worn, nothing like the polished girl I remembered, and when she spoke her voice cracked. She told me my mother's death wasn't an accident. That night she had overheard an argument. Our father and my mother screaming, my mother threatening to leave to expose everything. She said there was a struggle, then silence, and the next day the brakes on my mother's car had failed. Lily said she didn't know the full truth, just fragments, but enough to know something was wrong, and she kept quiet because her mother told her to, because she was scared, because family secrets are taught to stay buried. I left that pier with shaking hands and a fire in my chest. I knew what I had to do this time. It wasn't just about revenge, it was about justice for my mother, for myself, for the years stolen by lies. The legal battle was long, painful, and public. The truth was ugly, but I stood through it all. Through the courtrooms, the accusations, the threats, and when the final verdict came, that my father was guilty of involuntary manslaughter, I didn't cry, I didn't cheer, I just felt empty. I walked out of that courthouse alone but lighter. Now I live quietly, not hiding but choosing peace. I visit Emily often, and Daniel, after all the storms, has slowly found his way back to me, and though trust comes in pieces, we are learning to rebuild. My story is not just about betrayal or revenge, it's about survival, about reclaiming the truth even when it breaks you, because sometimes to find yourself you have to lose everything first. Spring came with silence, not the haunting kind, but the kind that feels like exhale after years of holding your breath. I started planting flowers on my windowsill, reading books my mother once loved, and writing in a journal, not for anyone else, just for me, for the pieces of myself I was finally beginning to understand. Emily and I grew closer, like two puzzle pieces that finally found their edges. We didn't rush anything, we shared memories, childhood wounds, and awkward laughter over how different, yet similar we were. She had our mother's patience, I had her fire, and together we filled the gaps that loss had carved into us. Daniel called more often now, sometimes just to talk, sometimes to cry, and one day he said something I'll never forget. He said, "Even though we don't share the same blood, you're still my sister, and I'd choose you again if I had to." I didn't realize how much I needed to hear that until the tears came, quiet and uninvited. But closure isn't a straight road, and peace doesn't erase memories. There were days I woke up angry, remembering the look on my father's face when the judge read the sentence. How he didn't flinch, didn't even look at me, like I was still the child he could control with silence. But I wasn't her anymore. One night I visited my mother's grave. For the first time since everything ended, I brought fresh lilies, her favorite, and sat by the marble, heart pounding with everything I never got to say, and I whispered, "I'm sorry it took me so long, but I found the truth, Mom, I found her. I found Emily, and I found myself." The wind picked up softly, brushing my hair back, and I didn't feel alone anymore. Weeks later, I received a package with no return address. Inside was a flash drive and a single note. "You deserve to know everything." The voice in the recording was my father's, speaking to someone over the phone, angry, scared, saying things that shattered whatever pieces of doubt I had left. He hadn't just let the brakes fail. He ordered someone to tamper with the car, hired a mechanic who disappeared months later, silenced and paid. The death wasn't accidental, it was planned, cold, deliberate. I handed it to the authorities without hesitation. This time it wasn't just manslaughter, it was murder. Another trial began, messier, darker, but I didn't waver. I sat in the front row every single day, not as a daughter mourning her father, but as a woman demanding justice for the mother who died, screaming into a silence no one listened to. When the guilty verdict came, I stood, walked out, and never looked back. And that was the day I finally felt free. Today I run a small foundation in my mother's name, helping women trapped in silence, women who carry secrets too heavy for their own bones, and I share my story, not for pity, not for fame, but to remind them they're not alone. Because I was once a girl surrounded by lies, betrayed by blood, haunted by grief, but I didn't let it destroy me. I burned down the ruins, and from the ashes I built a life. One with truth. One with family, chosen, found, and fiercely loved. And most importantly, one with peace. Just when I thought the past had given all it could, another layer pulled itself open like a wound that hadn't healed. It started with a woman, maybe in her late 30s, who approached me after I gave a talk at the foundation. She waited until the room was nearly empty, then walked up slowly, eyes dark, uncertain, and said quietly, "I think we might be sisters too." Her name was Claire, and she said she had been looking for me ever since the second trial made headlines. She showed me an old letter, handwritten by my father, dated nearly 2 decades ago. apologizing to her mother for abandoning their child to preserve his reputation. It was unmistakably his writing. I had seen it in birthday cards, old documents. The man had written love and lies with the same pen. Claire was calm, too calm for someone whose entire identity had just shifted. She had been raised in foster care after her mother passed, and had spent most of her life trying to find answers. Until the trial gave her the key, our family name. I agreed to a DNA test. Even though part of me already knew the truth, and when the results confirmed we were half-sisters, I didn't cry, I just laughed, a bitter, tired laugh, because at that point, the only thing surprising was that I hadn't met more of us scattered across the country. But then came the twist that shook even me. Claire had something else. A photo, old and grainy, showing my father in a small hospital holding a newborn, standing beside a woman who wasn't Claire's mother or mine or even Lily's mom. It was Vanessa, his second wife, and she was heavily pregnant in the picture. My blood ran cold. I remembered Vanessa's coldness, her obsession with control. How she always kept Daniel close, how she was the one who convinced him to turn against me during the early days of the scandal. I confronted Daniel, showed him the photo, and for the first time he looked uncertain, like his world was cracking. He confessed that Vanessa had raised him like her own, but that he always felt something was off. Another DNA test later, we found the final truth. Daniel wasn't my brother by blood, he was Vanessa's son. Born before she met my father, but my father took him in, raised him as his own, and used him as a pawn to keep Vanessa quiet, offering protection in exchange for loyalty. The betrayal cut deeper than before because I had held on to Daniel like the last piece of real family. But now I didn't even know what that word meant anymore. Vanessa was arrested weeks later, not for anything she did to me, but for embezzlement tied to my father's shady businesses. Turns out she wasn't just silent. She was an accomplice, laundering money through charities and posing as a grieving widow. And Lily, sweet, broken Lily, disappeared after the second trial. Until I received a letter in the mail, no return address, but unmistakably her voice. She wrote, "He wasn't the only monster. My mother, she knew about your mother's murder. She helped cover it up. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. I don't think I'll ever forgive myself." I didn't know where she went, and maybe I never will, but her words stayed with me, like a ghost brushing the back of my neck on quiet nights. In the end, the family I had wasn't built on blood, it was built on choice. Emily, Claire, even Daniel, who, despite the betrayal, still came back, still sat with me on stormy nights, still said, "I don't know who I am anymore, but you're the only one who ever made me feel like I mattered." They were my family now, imperfect, scattered, but real. The name Morgan, once spoken with pride, now carried the weight of scandal, murder, betrayal, but I didn't hide from it. I reclaimed it. I wore it like armor. Because I survived it all. And the legacy I would leave behind would not be their lies. It would be my truth. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe for more powerful stories.